In 2008, Gordon Brown created the Department of Energy and Climate Change. In 2016, Theresa May announced the Department of Energy and Climate Change would become the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. In February this year, Rishi Sunak told us the signs on the doors of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy were being changed again for new ones which read Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, reflecting obviously the post-Ukraine political priorities. The names may change, but the challenge is really exactly the same. Provide enough reliable, affordable energy for the increasing demands of UK consumers and industry, while at the same time reducing those demands and putting up the country on a path to net zero by 2050. For this sector, challenge is really the same. The need for secure energy provision while simultaneously reducing carbon and demand. We should talk about this stuff. And as luck would have it, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what we're going to do right now in a session entitled Empowering Your Path to Decarbonisation. Please welcome the Business Development Director at eSmart, Chris Doré.
Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about electricity because we have 20 minutes. It's a massive topic. And one of the things that has been touched on is absolutely fantastic, the leaders in the previous sessions of key priorities for developers and investors. We're actually going to be touching on 3 of those 8 key priorities in the next 20 minutes. So one of the things that we need to talk about is your interaction with the electricity grid is inevitable. No one has found a way yet of creating an island, and your need for power will change, but your connection with the grid, and we'll touch on the role of the grid, both positive and negative in this journey. The issue with it is interaction with the grid is exactly the same for everyone else. Net zero 2050 is not an industrial and logistics target, it is a UK legal target. So anyone that's planning to develop anything, increase the power demand of an existing shed or any kind of estate will come across a challenge for grid capacity. Now, this grid capacity issue is wildly variable when it comes from one region to another. Again, we haven't got time to go into that, but there's a lot of people out there that can help with that. But one of the reasons that we're talking about electricity today and not other energy sources, and there will be examples of other energy sources that will be used, but fundamentally, the grid exists. It's here. Whilst it hasn't been updated for some decades, it does exist. It is out there. It is known technology. It's simple. There's no innovation required. It's just an extension of the existing network that's needed. The other thing is the relative efficiency. How the energy is moved around does not require additional health and safety issues on site. You're not storing hazardous materials. You're not having to reinvent the wheel or come up with new technologies. The other thing is the success, and one of the wins that you guys are going to take away for free is that the decarbonisation of the electrical grid has been one of the biggest success stories in the UK that probably doesn't get enough press. So just this year, the sad person that I do monitor this on a regular basis, but National Grid have a live app. I guarantee none of you are going to download it, but trust me, on the 4th of January this year, 87.6% of the energy generated was zero carbon. 6 days later, on the 10th of January, we hit maximum wind at 21.6 gigawatts. And on the 10th of April, just a few days ago, we got to the lowest carbon intensity of the UK grid ever at 33 grams per kilowatt hour. To put that into context, 2008, it was 495 grams per kilowatt hour. So whatever you end up doing, your consumption of electricity will lead you on a path to zero carbon. So utilising, which is why I'm suggesting utilising energy is the way forward. The other thing with energy, as you can see with electric vehicles, once you get energy, a battery and a computer, you can have all sorts of self-driving technology. It can heat itself. It can do all sorts of things that you can't do with traditional high carbon or internal combustion. So the issue with how big a race is, I love this graphic. This is from the National Grid ESO report that they've done for a number of years. And effectively, you don't need the detail. This is about colours. So effectively, at the top is natural gas. In the middle is electricity in the sandy yellow colour. You then have bioresource in the strange brown. And at the bottom is basically other fuels, which is petrol, diesel, avgas. So what you can see is on the right-hand side is where it's consumed. And you can see industrial and commercial, which is National Grid's version, is at the top, broadly 50% natural gas. And this was FACT in 2020, broadly 50% others, with obviously electricity being a large part of that. Residential, you can see, most people have gas central heating. We know that that's shifting. And then down at the bottom, road and rail transport, you can see, unsurprisingly, it's petrol, diesel, and the like. So at the same time they do this report, or this as is, they also do a prediction at 2050, which, as we know, is the drop dead date for net zero. So just pay attention to the colours. That is their prediction in 2050. Now, there's 3 scenarios they predict. This is one of them. It could be wildly inaccurate, but direction of travel is key. So what you can see, if you look at industrial and commercial, it is now sitting shoulder to shoulder with residential, road and rail transport. You're sharing your demands of the electrical grid with new entrants. You know, a Shell petrol station is now firmly competing for the same power that you are. So in terms of 309 terawatt hours, I think it was, we're now at 992. You will see there's an ever so slight line of natural gas still. That is for some high heat processing that you just can't get to the temperature with any other energy source. But fundamentally, you can see the change of race into, obviously, electrical. As you know, the UK really copes well when things are in short supply. As we all know from lockdown, I've still got a garage full of toilet rolls if anyone's interested. But we do not cope well. And there's various things. There's the people that ignore it. There's the people that panic buy and buy up as much as they possibly can. And then there's the people in the middle that are generally confused of what to do. So in terms of the race for this and the lack of available grid capacity compared to what us as a sector need for our new products and everything else, we're in a bit of an issue in terms of this shortage mentality. So, you know it's important when the government get involved, and the government put a statement and said, National Grid really should sort out the time it takes to get connections. Now that's a pretty stern thing. It makes no difference whatsoever, because fundamentally the grid response is built around its regulated status, the fact that you need physical material, equipment and everything else that goes with it. And the demand for energy on that slide, electrical energy, has a direct link to the amount of people, cable, transformers, joints, designers, planners, off-site excavation and everything else that goes into dividing or bringing that energy to site. So the demand for everything has gone up. So we know we're in a race, and we know there's some pretty big industries that we're racing against. The positive is you're not residential, because trust me, you would not want to be in residential right now, because they lack all of the flexibility that you have as industrial and logistics or any other form of industrial and commercial development. They have to provide a fixed amount of power in a fixed location with no ability to use batteries or storage or anything, or solar or anything. So it has been said in our business, it's not the size of the shed, it's what you do in it that counts. Now, previously, there used to be a lot of rules of thumb of so many kilowatts per square foot. Those are now being blown away. We're now seeing a much more varied requirement for energy density, as we call it. You can have a very small shed with a automated logistics hub in it. You can have bottling plants. You can have a microbrewery. You can have vertical farming. You can have chilled units. Remember the amount of reshoring and nearshoring we're doing. It's just demanding, pushing up the demand for power, especially moving into inner cities, last mile. So the other area is if you look at that previous graph where the black line shows liquid fuel, that was a responsibility of the Shell filling station, the BP filling station down the road. Occasionally you might have some fuel on site, but generally you wouldn't. To be a viable, robust looking development and to attract the best of the best, and some of our online retail companies will demand an entire car park full of charging units so that their van fleet can leave the following morning fully charged. That can take more power than all of the sheds on the development combined. So you're now taking responsibility for fueling vehicles. That was never the remit. So it's how we embrace that. Industrial logistics also, unlike residential, brings with it some real flexibility. You can engage with the grid, you can engage with your energy solution, you can utilise your massive roofs as you do, and it's fantastic to see a picture of Seagro's shed with loads of solar panels on it. It is happening, but it's not happening at the scale we need. The other thing we can do is utilise batteries, and we'll touch on that in a second. So, we've now got a grid that we need to interact with. One of the things we need to look at is how we can do that with increasing certainty and going forward from there. So this is a typical conversation with a grid. Now, I would use the two roles here. You guys are on the left, the DNO, UK Power Networks, Western Power Distribution, SSE, whoever you want, or NGED as they're known, are on the right-hand side. So you are dynamic, you're fast-paced, you're entrepreneurial, you're creative, you've got all of that going on. And then you've got the grid, which is fixed, regulated, safe, scared, and I would suggest that the conversation that you have between you or whoever represents you and the grid is that of a grumpy teenager. You go, what do you want for dinner? Do you want to go out tonight? Do you want to fancy this? And what? And you just get that one-word answer when they decide to give it to you. So unless you know the exact question to ask, you're not going to get the response you want. And when they're in a regulated position where they can take 4, 6, 8 weeks to come back, trying to get the right answer can take months. So you will always get a yes. If you ask for power, the answer's always yes. They have to say yes. And that's one of the things that people forget. It's always yes, but it's going to cost this amount of money and it's going to take that amount of time. That's the key thing. Can you tolerate the cost? Can you tolerate the time? And often it's a mixture of both. So what we're suggesting is what's the minimum you need, but equally, what would great look like? What would attract a better, a higher profit margin tenant if you could offer electrification of free at not a significant additional cost? So this two-dimensional conversation needs to be pushed over time. So what we end up with is we start, your projects do not come out of the ground fully formed. You don't walk out with a full construction set of drawings going, we're done. That's not how it works. You often run various options. You've got to work out whether planning is going to work. Is it speculative? Is it built to requirement? All of those things happen over time and across your portfolio. So what you need to be doing is you need to be engaging with a grid specialist, bring it to the top of your agenda and make sure it stays there. Because a site with planning and funding and a tenant, but with no grid connection, is of no use to you at all. So what we do is we go out, we start the conversation, and then we end up with, you can't quite have that, but you can have this. Okay, well, that doesn't quite work for us because it goes across 2 metres of land owned by Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who have seen a very, very wealthy developer come to town and are going to hold you ransom. So let's scrap that. Can we go somewhere else? There's an area that needs a huge amount of reinforcement. Let's scrap that. Let's go somewhere else. Let's basically interrogate the grid. And remember, whatever connection you do is constantly decarbonising. So your electrical solution is going to feed into your EPC rating. The other thing we can do is we can move away from the owning and operating by using an independent distribution network operator, an IDNO. Now, a number of you will have used IDNOs in the past, and what that does is, if you remember the teenager, it's basically the DNO that's grown up. It's the DNO that gets you. It's the DNO that's engaged with you, understands you've got money to make and properties to build and tenants to get. It comes with solutions, not one-word answers. It also comes with cash, putting it bluntly. There is a value to the networks that you build. One thing I would say, and we are soon to be an IDNO, it is intentional for us to be open and honest about the OPEX, CAPEX split when you're presented with a significant amount of cash as an investment. Because we can pay, it's £1 million that investment, that network is worth, but it could leave your occupiers with crippling OPEX because of the way that it suits the IDNO. So as a health warning, if there's nothing else, take that away and make sure that you're aware of that. So it improves legals, the other thing that always gets in the way. So again, you're bringing interaction with a DNO, you're bringing someone that's going to run and operate it that's flexible. And more importantly, moving on to the last point, there is a much broader depth of knowledge and also ability to integrate batteries, solar, and other renewable technologies on site, which often falls by the wayside because the grid is left too late. You don't have a grid solution, or you cannot maintain that conversation with the DNO. So, integrating with the grid can prove difficult, and to be honest, it is difficult. And there's a lot of engineers from eSmart Networks in the room, and I've seen the work they do, and I don't understand any of it, if I'm honest. But what we do need to do is start the conversation early with the other side of the meter. There's two very different worlds. There's our side of the meter and the other side of the meter. And what often happens is those two worlds are not brought up together within your project, which either means that the grid takes precedence and it all collapses, or you end up not integrating with the grid properly and it's all kept on site and you don't get the true benefit out of it. And you are blessed with space and roofs and everything else, the ability to do this. Now, integrating with the grid means you are actually playing the system. You can control when you consume electricity. You can shift power from peak times when everyone's watching EastEnders and just put the kettle on and everything else. You can shift and store power. You can provide uninterrupted power supplies for your key systems on site. And again, needless to say, anything you do generate and store on site is low carbon. So, the watchword in the business is find, capture and keep. To enable you to do everything you want to do on site, and that is, if you look at the 8 things, there was cost certainty, supply chain, and carbon reduction. So cost certainty can really be an issue with the grid. If you miss a connection and you then go out for another application and it goes up by £250,000, which is not unheard of at the moment, that is straight off someone's bottom line. It's either yours or the landowner's, but it's coming off of someone and it adds zero value. And I think that's the important thing. This is, sometimes you invest, sometimes you pay money, you get a response back and you get a return back, maybe long-term, maybe short-term. This is zero return. So it's to be avoided at all costs. So get someone who is looking at your grid early and keep them involved across your entire pipeline. Because often, and we have had one customer say, I can locate my factory, my food processing it was, in one of 3 locations. I've got options on these 3 pieces of land ready to go. Which one can I connect to fastest? And that was the one they went with. Because the grid is fast becoming the thing that's getting in your way. So, elevate the grid. It needs to be risk and opportunity register. You need to start going, well, actually, we might be able to get more power here than we need. That might give us more options. We may be able to, leave it as a potential for an incoming tenant to use. Whatever you do will provide more low carbon use. So if you've got a fleet, it's more low carbon use because there's electricity decarbonisers, as we say. It's important to keep that conversation going. So once you've got your first, inevitably it won't be acceptable. You've got your first response back from the DNO. It's then going, well, actually, that's not good enough, but we will go this way. Remembering that you will have time constraints. No one in this room has got projects that they don't mind, it will turn up when it turns up. That's not the way projects work. The other thing is, and I think it's fair to say, anyone that has come across a DNO, and some of you will have done, some of you give it to a consultant to have the grey hair, will love the ability to hold them to account and push back and go, do you know what, I'm not happy with that. That's also something that is able to be done when you have the right grid specialists. And then the other thing is there is a significant change in the market at the moment in Ofgem's ability to try and create some fairness, where certain things are free, and you'll be told that reinforcement is free. You'll be told that you can have this connection for nothing, and so on. Be careful of free. We will hold that, sort of hold your hand through those charging changes, because a free connection delivered whenever the DNO wants to deliver it in development terms isn't free. There is often a solution that you can go and find that is a defined cost at a defined time with someone like us or a similar business delivering it. That is me. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Well done, mate. Yeah. I particularly like the grumpy teenager analogy. I think many of us have been there. Thanks to Chris.